Welcome back, folks. In my last video, we were discussing the CompTIA 220 1001 exam for the A+ certification. Continuing on that discussion today, we will look at the 220 1002 exam, which is part 2 and the final exam required to successfully achieve the A+ designation. Now, if you haven't watched that previous video, go back and check it out before you watch this one, because while the two exams are meant to be independent of each other, the reality is you really need to grasp an understanding of the 1001 to fully get the 1002. That being said, let's dive into the Core 2. Similar to the Core 1, the 1002 exam consists of a maximum of 90 questions over 90 minutes. But instead of being more hardware-centric like the Core 1, this exam focuses heavily on troubleshooting and more help desk style issues. As you can see, the 1002 covers installing and configuring operating systems, expanding security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. This course also requires a slightly higher average to pass, with 700 being the minimum score. Other than that, it's the exact same as the Core 1, with 9 to 12 months of recommended experience and an average exam cost of $226 USD per exam. Now let's head on over to the exam objectives and see what they require. The Core 2 is broken down into 4 separate domains, as you can see here. They are operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So let's scroll down and see what CompTIA wants us to know for this exam. Now, as you can see, the operating section covers a ton of material. You're going to need to know the difference between a 32-bit and 64-bit systems, as well as which one can hold which amount of RAM, the basics of Windows, Linux, and Mac, and be able to tell the difference between the two. Phone OSs. You're going to have to know the difference between Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10. You're also going to want to pay attention to which ones can be upgraded where. There's an entire portion on which versions can be migrated upwards, and that'll become really important for the exam. Hint, hint. You also need to know the different type of installation methods, as well as the type of install you will be performing, the different type of file systems, and a basic understanding of partitions. You'll need the minimum of command line and how to move about that. Now, pay close attention to this part. This is probably the most important parts in my opinion. Know these tools and what they do and how to find them. There's a whole bunch of them, so I'll leave this up on the screen temporarily. I'll also be including a link to CompTIA's website to download this objective for yourself, but these will come up. You also need to know how to change settings in various places: internet, display, system settings, firewall, power settings, etc. You'll need to understand the different requirements for your installation, OS requirements, how to set up a VPN, wireless network, IP addressing, and DNS. You need to understand backups and basic Mac functionality like keychain and dock. You also want to know some basic Linux commands: ls, cd, move, copy. Moving on to the security section, you're going to want to understand what a man trap is, what biometric and hardware tokens are, understand Active Directory and group policies, what MDM and MAC filtering are, data loss prevention. You're also going to want to understand the basic Wi-Fi standards and encryptions, as well as the difference between TACACS and Radius. Understand the basics of malware and how to prevent them, be able to spot different social engineering techniques, understand permissions, password policies, usage policy, the benefits and drawbacks to using certain kinds of biometrics. You're going to want to understand the best way to destroy data. Hint, it isn't always kill it with fire. Understand how to configure a Soho network. Moving along to the troubleshooting section, this section is very similar to the troubleshooting section of the 1001 in the sense that you'll need to understand some basic stuff like why a user can't see their secondary monitor, or why their PC is running slow after downloading a new program. You'll need to understand how to research the problem and the steps you need to solve it. Now, the operational procedure section felt largely managerial in my opinion. Understanding why certain documents exist, why certain protocols must be followed, like what a change request is and why you need to get one, for example. It's also important to know about UPS and backup types, cloud options, equipment handling, incident response, and the different types of data and regulations surrounding it, like GDPR and HIPAA. You'll also want to know some of the best practices for a technician, which this is honestly just basic customer service level stuff that should be common sense, although I do understand why it needs to be explained specifically in current year. Now, I didn't personally come across any scripting questions when I took the exam, but just understand that they may be there. So know what a loop is, or understand what a .py file opens, and you should be good. And finally, we round off the objectives with remote desktop options like RDP and SSH. So that's it. That's the course objectives in a nutshell. Like I said with the 1001 exam, there is an absolutely massive amount of information for what is supposed to be an entry-level course. This course is not for the faint of heart. That being said, my study method for the 1002 was exactly the same as the one I used for the 1001. I did switch up the order for the 1002 though. I used Professor Messer on YouTube initially. His video series contains 63 videos. As you see, he covers just about everything required to pass the exam. I felt extremely confident after going through this course, but never being satisfied with good enough, I went back to Mike Myers on Udemy. Udemy usually has a sale on materials, so I suggest you wait a few days so you don't have to pay $150 for this. Although this is definitely not a dig at the quality of the course, I do believe it's worth every penny. However, I pay for most of my certs out of pocket, and $150 is just way too much for my wallet. So if you can afford it, by all means. But as you can see, there are 15 hours worth of video dedicated to helping you pass the Core 2. So, the exam was pretty typical, although I will say the performance questions did seem a bit harder than the questions on the 1001, although I believe that was primarily due to some weird wording in the question, so just make sure you read those questions very carefully. Other than that, it was a pretty standard CompTIA exam. Focus was placed heavily on the more help desk style of questions, so understand how to fix something that's broken. Now, I really enjoyed the A+. It contains absolutely vital information that should not be skipped, even if you've been in IT for a long time. So for my next video, I'll be going through my steps towards preparing for the OSCP. I purchased the PWK about a month ago, and I have been really slacking on getting any work done on it, so I figured I'd work through it and share the things I learned with you, in an NDA compliant way, of course. So stay tuned for episode 1 of The Road to Pwn. Until then, stay learning, stay growing, stay overcoming. Peace.